The words corporate restructuring hung in the air, thick and suffocating like Chicago smog. My boss, Mr. Sterling himself, wouldn't meet my eyes. He just slid a crisp, white envelope across the polished mahogany of his desk. My termination letter. 24 hours earlier, on this very spot, I'd been beaming, sharing the news that my wife Sarah and I were finally pregnant after years of trying. He'd clapped me on the back, offered a plastic smile, and said, "Congratulations, David." Now, this. He thought he was cutting a line item from a spreadsheet. He had no idea he'd just signed a declaration of war. A war my brilliant wife, Sarah Chen, Esquire, was born to win. I walked through our front door, the termination letter, a cold weight in my hand. Sarah looked up from the kitchen island where she'd been sketching nursery designs. Her smile, the one that had carried me through years of disappointment, faltered. "David, what happened?" I couldn't form the words. I just slid the Sterling Finch envelope across the granite countertop, a bitter echo of the meeting an hour before. She read it, her expression shifting from wifely concern to the razor-sharp focus I'd seen her use in court depositions. Her eyes, dark and intelligent, flicked from the date to the signature. She didn't rage. She didn't cry. She simply tapped a finger on the single, damning line about corporate restructuring. "Did Sterling say anything else?" she asked, her voice chillingly calm. "He said congratulations yesterday." A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a shark that just scented blood in the water. "Good," she said, pulling her laptop closer. "That makes proving pretextual firing much, much easier." Her laptop hummed, the only sound in the room besides the frantic beating of my own heart. I watched her, this woman I loved, transform. The soft lines of her face hardened into angles of pure, unadulterated focus. This was Sarah Chen, the litigator. The one her opponents called the surgeon, because she never went for a quick kill. She methodically dissected you on the stand, piece by painful piece, until there was nothing left. 15 years, Sarah, I finally managed to say, my voice cracking. I gave that man 15 years of my life. I thought of the missed anniversaries, the holidays spent closing year-end deals, the sheer volume of my life poured into Sterling Finch's balance sheets. I did it for us. For this. For the stable foundation we needed while navigating the emotional and financial hell of IVF treatments. 3 failed rounds. The crippling disappointments. The hushed, late-night conversations about giving up. This baby, our little miracle, was supposed to be the reward for all that sacrifice. Sterling knew it. I'd practically bled for his firm, and my reward was a pink slip because he'd done the math on my paternity leave. "He's betting you'll be too broken to fight back," Sarah murmured, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She wasn't looking at me, but I knew she was picturing it all. "He sees a new father, financially vulnerable, emotionally exhausted. He thinks you're easy prey." She finally looked up, her eyes boring into mine. "He's forgotten who you're married to." I let out a shaky breath, a strange mix of grief and savage pride. For years I'd been the stable one, the rock, with the steady corporate job, while she built her fearsome reputation at one of Chicago's top labor law firms. We'd always joked about it. "God help the poor sap whoever illegally fires you." I used to say, "We never imagined the poor sap would be me." "What's the first step?" I asked, my own resolve beginning to crystallize. Sarah's shark-like smile returned, all teeth. "First, we let them think they've won. Let Sterling sleep well tonight, confident he's trimmed the fat." She paused, pulling up a blank document on her screen. "Then, we get every single piece of paper with your name on it. Every performance review, every email chain praising your work, every bonus letter. Especially the one from last quarter." I remembered it. Sterling had called my performance exemplary. "He thinks he's an apex predator," Sarah continued, typing the words complaint draft at the top of the page. "He's about to find out he's just food." The digital paper trail was our foundation. For the next 3 hours, I was an archaeologist in my own home office, excavating the ruins of a 15-year career. I sifted through old personal emails, unearthing forwarded copies of every performance review. The words, once a source of pride, now tasted like acid. Indispensable to the team. Exemplary performance. Record-breaking quarter thanks to David's leadership. I compiled them into a folder, a monument to my own loyalty, now weaponized against the man I'd been loyal to. But Sarah needed more. We had proof of my value yesterday, but we needed proof that the company was healthy today. Proof that restructuring was a lie. The Q4 projections, I said, looking up from my screen. We finalized them on Tuesday. They were stellar. If we had those, they'll be on the company server, Sarah finished, already seeing the problem, which you can no longer access. My mind raced. There was only one way. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over a name I'd texted 1,000 times. Mark. We'd started in the mailroom together, climbing the ladder on parallel rungs. His kid and my hypothetical future kid were supposed to play together. Is he a friend or a colleague? Sarah asked, her tone clinical. A friend, I said with more confidence than I felt. I pressed call. He picked up on the second ring. Dave, what's up? I took a breath. They let me go, Mark. Silence. Then a hesitant, what? No way. Why? Restructuring, I said, the word feeling filthier each time I said it. Listen, I need a huge favor. An off-the-books favor. The final Q4 projections we finished on Tuesday. Can you download the file and email it to my Gmail? Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear the gears turning in his head, the calculation of risk versus friendship. Man, that's tough. Sterling is on a warpath, cutting costs. I know, I said, my voice low. He's cutting my paternity leave. That's what this is. Mark, please, for 15 years. A heavy sigh crackled through the phone. Okay, man. For you. I'll send it over in a bit. Just be careful. Thank you, I breathed, relief washing over me. I owe you. Yeah, he said, his voice distant. You do. He hung up. I waited. 1 hour, then 2. My optimism curdled into a familiar dread. Every refresh of my inbox was a small, sharp disappointment. Then, at 4:17 p.m., a new email finally appeared. But it wasn't from Mark. The sender was Sterling Finch Legal Department. My blood ran cold. It was a formal cease and desist. A chillingly polite letter, CCing a senior partner at a massive corporate law firm, informing me that my employment was terminated, and any attempt to contact current employees or solicit proprietary company information would be met with swift and severe legal action. It was a kill shot, delivered with corporate precision. Mark hadn't just ghosted me, he'd sprinted straight to HR, my desperate plea held up as evidence of my treachery. The betrayal was so absolute, so much deeper than Sterling's. It knocked the wind out of me. Sterling was my boss. Mark was my friend. I walked back to the kitchen, phone in my hand, feeling utterly alone. I showed the email to Sarah. She read it, her expression unreadable. Then she looked up, and for the first time, I saw the full, terrifying power of the surgeon at work. A slow smile spread across her lips. "Oh, you beautiful, stupid man," she whispered. Not to me, but to Sterling. "You just handed me witness tampering on a silver platter." She stood up, grabbing her briefcase. "They think they've cornered us. They have no idea we're the ones building the cage." "Witness tampering?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Sarah, he sold me out. Mark, my friend, threw me to the wolves for a pat on the head from Sterling. And in doing so, he became our star witness," she replied, her voice steady and devoid of pity. She took the phone from my numb fingers and placed its screen up on the counter, like a piece of evidence at a crime scene. "Don't you see? This isn't just a cease and desist. This is a confession." She started pacing, not with anxiety, but with the caged energy of a predator. "Think about it, David. You make one phone call to a friend, asking for a document that would prove your stellar performance. A document you helped create. What does a company with nothing to hide do? They might have HR send a polite reminder about confidentiality. But Sterling Finch? They hire a bulldog corporate firm to threaten you with severe legal action and accuse you of soliciting proprietary information. Why? Because they know exactly what's in that file. They know it proves their restructuring is a complete fabrication. Every word she said sliced through my grief, replacing it with cold, hard clarity. The betrayal still stung, but she was reframing it. Mark wasn't the story. He was a footnote. This letter, she tapped the phone screen, is Sterling panicking. He's retaliating against you for attempting to gather evidence for your wrongful termination claim. That is illegal. It's a separate and often more powerful claim than the initial discrimination. She stopped pacing and looked at me, her eyes locking onto mine. They are so terrified of what you know that they threatened you to keep you quiet. They just handed the EEOC a signed, dated, and legally drafted admission of guilt. My own anger, which had been a wild, painful fire, was now being forged into something sharp, something useful. So, Mark, he actually helped us? Immensely, Sarah confirmed, a grim smile touching her lips. She retrieved her laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating her determined face. He was their pawn, and now he'll be ours. During discovery, I'm going to ask him, under oath, exactly who he talked to after your call. I'm going to get the exact time he reported you, and the exact time this letter was sent. We're going to paint a picture of a company so desperate to hide their illegal discrimination that they strong-armed an employee into betraying a friend and then immediately tried to intimidate their victim into silence. She pulled up the complaint draft again, her fingers poised over the keyboard. They thought they were building a wall. They just gave us the battering ram. The hum of the laser printer was the only sound in our home office for the next hour. It was a sound of production, of industry, but it felt like the loading of a weapon. Sarah hadn't drafted a complaint. Not yet. She'd crafted something far more insidious, a litigation hold and pre-action demand letter. It was a masterpiece of professional courtesy, layered over a core of pure steel. They're expecting us to be emotional, she explained, holding up the first printed page, the ink still warm. They're waiting for a messy, angry lawsuit from a disgruntled ex-employee. We're not going to give them that. We're going to be calm, professional, and utterly terrifying. I read the letter over her shoulder. It didn't threaten. It didn't accuse. It simply recited facts. It began by referencing my 15 years of loyal service, quoting verbatim from my exemplary performance reviews. It then noted the date and time I joyfully informed Mr. Sterling of our pregnancy. It followed with the date and time of my termination, exactly 24 hours later, for, quote, corporate restructuring. Each fact was a perfectly placed stone, building an inescapable wall of logic. Then came the masterstroke. The letter coolly described my attempt to contact a colleague, Mark, to procure a document I myself had co-authored. It then detailed, with chilling precision, the arrival of the threatening cease and desist from their high-powered law firm, noting the timestamp. It framed their legal threat not as a defensive move, but as an aggressive, illegal act of retaliation against my protected right to gather evidence. You're using their own letter against them. I breathed, a sense of awe cutting through my anger. Their lawyer, a man named Arthur Crane, just made himself a material witness. Sarah said, her voice grimly satisfied. He's so used to bullying people that he didn't stop to think. He just fired his cannon. Now we get to show a judge the crater it left. The letter concluded not with a demand for millions, but with two simple, deceptively reasonable requests. First, the immediate delivery of my complete, unredacted personnel file. Second, a copy of the official Sterling Finch Associates Corporate Restructuring Plan of 2023, including the criteria for employee selection, and a list of all positions eliminated. Why aren't we asking for money? I asked. the question feeling crass but necessary. "I want to punish him, Sarah. I want him to pay." She turned in her chair to face me, her expression softening for a moment. "I know, and we will, but throwing out a big number right now is a rookie move. It lets them frame us as greedy. Instead, we ask for things they must have if their story is true. A restructuring plan isn't optional. It's a legal necessity for a layoff this size. We are giving them the opportunity to prove their own innocence." Her shark-like smile returned, "And when they can't produce it, their silence will be more damning than any accusation I could ever write. We're not asking for money. We're asking them to hand us the shovel so we can let them dig their own grave." She attached the signed PDF to a new email. The recipient list was short and brutal. Mr. Sterling, the head of HR, and Arthur Crane, the bulldog lawyer. The subject line was simple: regarding the employment of David Chen. She hovered her finger over the mouse. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded, my throat tight. "Burn them to the ground." She clicked. Send. The sound was barely audible, but it felt like a declaration of war landing in the heart of their fortress. The silence that followed was the worst part. For 6 days, our lives were a strange limbo. We went for walks, we assembled a crib. We tried to live the life Sterling had tried to snatch away from us. But every ping of Sarah's phone sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. We were living in the split second after the lightning flash, waiting for the thunder. Sarah, however, was a picture of unnerving calm. "They're panicking," she said one evening as I paced the living room. "A letter like that sets off a firestorm. Sterling is screaming at HR. HR is screaming at their lawyer. And the lawyer, Mr. Crane, is realizing he made a catastrophic error. He's billing them hundreds of dollars an hour to figure out how to clean up a mess he made. Be patient." On the 7th day, the thunder rolled in. An email arrived. It was from Arthur Crane. His tone was no longer threatening. It was dismissive, arrogant, dripping with condescension. He called our claims fanciful and entirely without merit. He stated that Sterling Finch would not be, quote, "cowed by baseless accusations," and would certainly not be turning over confidential internal documents. He painted me as a mediocre employee let go as part of a legitimate, company-wide cost-cutting measure. Then came the insult, masquerading as an offer. Without any admission of wrongdoing, he wrote, "But in the interest of avoiding the nuisance of frivolous litigation, my client is prepared to offer your husband a severance of 4 weeks, pay, in exchange for a standard non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement." 4 weeks. After 15 years. It was less than the bonus I'd received last quarter. It was a slap in the face. It was pocket change, designed to humiliate me. I felt a surge of white-hot rage. "That's it? He's laughing at us. 4 weeks pay?" I was shouting, my voice cracking with disbelief. "He thinks we're a nuisance?" I expected Sarah to be angry. I expected her to start hammering out a furious reply. Instead, I looked over and saw her leaning back in her chair, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across her face. It was the most terrifying expression I had ever seen on her. She looked at me, her eyes shining with predatory delight. "David," she said, her voice a low, dangerous purr. "He didn't send the restructuring plan." It took a second for the implication to land. They had blustered, they had insulted, they had lowballed, but they hadn't sent the one document that could have ended our entire claim. "Because it doesn't exist," I whispered, the realization dawning on me. "Because it doesn't exist," she confirmed, turning back to her screen. "Mr. Crane just tried to bluff his way out of a royal flush. He thinks he's playing poker." She began typing a new document title. "He's about to find out we're the house, and the house always wins." Sarah didn't bother replying to Arthur Crane. She simply saved his condescending email to a folder she labeled Exhibit A. "He just put his client's contempt in writing," she said, her voice a low hum of satisfaction. "Juries hate that." She spun her chair around, her face illuminated by the screen. "Forget him. We're not talking to him anymore. We're going over his head." She navigated to a government website, the stark blue and white of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC. It wasn't a court, not yet. For a company like Sterling Finch, it was something far worse. It was a bureaucratic meat grinder. When you file a lawsuit, you're on the offensive, she explained, her fingers already flying across an online form. It's expensive, it's public, and it gives them a clear target. But an EEOC charge is different. It's an official complaint to a federal agency. They are now legally obligated to investigate. Sterling Finch won't be responding to me, their legal adversary. They'll be responding to the United States government. And they will have to do it under penalty of perjury. For the next 2 hours, we meticulously crafted the charge. It was a masterclass in factual brutality. We attached my glowing performance reviews. We detailed the damning timeline, the pregnancy announcement on Monday, the termination on Tuesday. We included Crane's threatening cease and desist letter as clear evidence of retaliation. And we highlighted their conspicuous failure to produce the non-existent restructuring plan. Every word was a nail. We were building Sterling's coffin. When she clicked Submit, the confirmation page felt more final than any declaration of war. We had lit the fuse and walked away. Weeks bled into months. The process was agonizingly slow, a war of attrition fought through paperwork. Sarah assured me this was part of the strategy. "They're paying Crane thousands of dollars to handle this," she'd say, watching me pace. "We're paying nothing. Let them bleed money." Let Sterling get angrier and angrier at the legal bills piling up for a nuisance problem he could have avoided. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, the countermove landed in her inbox. It was from the EEOC investigator, attaching Sterling Finch's formal position statement, their official, sworn response to our charges. It was a thick PDF, a fortress of legalese built by Arthur Crane. We sat together at the kitchen island, the same place I'd sketched out our future, and began to dismantle their version of the past. It was a work of fiction. They claimed my termination had nothing to do with the timing of my announcement. They painted me as an employee whose performance had been trending downward for months. A shocking, blatant lie. They insisted a formal restructuring had taken place, driven by unforeseen market headwinds. "They're lying," I said, my voice hoarse with disbelief. "Trending downward?" They gave me a record bonus 3 months ago for exemplary performance. "I know," Sarah said, her eyes scanning the document, hungry and focused. "Let them lie. They just have to make one mistake. One tiny, verifiable, catastrophic mistake." She scrolled faster, her finger tracing the lines of text. Then she stopped. Her entire body went still. She leaned closer to the screen, her breath fogging it slightly. "Oh, Arthur," she whispered, a sound of pure, unholy glee. "You magnificent idiot. What is it?" I asked, leaning in, my heart pounding. She pointed to a single paragraph in a section titled Restructuring Selection Criteria. To justify why I was chosen for termination over other senior managers, Crane had written that my role was being eliminated as part of a strategic decision to dissolve the mid-cap growth division, the department I supposedly led. I stared at the words, utterly confused. "The mid-cap growth division? Sarah, that division hasn't existed for 5 years. They merged it into a larger group, back in 2018. I was a part of the emerging markets sector team. He got it wrong." Sarah pushed back from the table slowly, a stunned, predatory smile spreading across her face. It was the look of a chess master who had just watched her opponent in a fit of arrogance move his own king directly into checkmate. "He didn't just get it wrong, David," she said, her voice trembling with restrained excitement. "He invented a lie, a sloppy, lazy, arrogant lie. To respond to the EEOC, they would have had to pull your official HR file, your current department, your title, your team. It's all on the first page. They were so desperate to create a paper trail after the fact that they didn't even bother to check their own records. They just made something up. She looked at me, her eyes wider and brighter than I'd ever seen them. They have just submitted a sworn statement to a federal agency containing a demonstrably false claim. This isn't just about pretext anymore. This isn't about discrimination. She paused, letting the weight of her next words fill the room. This is fraud. They lied to the government. She stood up and walked to the window. She walked to the window, looking down at the Chicago streets but seeing something else entirely. They lied under penalty of perjury, she said, her voice quiet. This case is over. The only thing left to discuss is the number of zeros on the check. My hands were shaking, not with anger anymore, but with a giddy, terrifying sense of power. What now? Now, she said, turning from the window, her eyes blazing. We provide the proof. It was my turn to be the archaeologist again. I dug through my archived work emails, a digital tomb of my former life. It took less than 10 minutes. The search term was merger. The result was an email from 2018. The sender was Mr. Sterling. The subject line, exciting new chapter, announcing the emerging market sector. It laid out, in his own cheerful corporate prose, the dissolution of the mid-cap growth division and my new role within the larger, newly formed group. It was the smoking gun, fired from Sterling's own hand 5 years earlier. Sarah didn't gloat. She simply attached the email, Sterling's email, to a short, polite, and devastating reply to the EEOC investigator. Her cover note was a single sentence. For your reference, please see the attached internal communication from Sterling Finch, dated October 12, 2018. We sent it, and we waited. This time the silence lasted less than 48 hours. My phone rang from an unknown number. I answered, putting it on speaker. David Chen, I said. A strained, unfamiliar voice answered. Mr. Chen, this is Arthur Crane. The change in his tone was staggering. The condescending bulldog was gone, replaced by the cautious deference of a man walking through a minefield. The arrogance had been replaced by pure, uncut fear. I believe, Crane stammered, clearing his throat, there has been a significant misunderstanding regarding our recent EEOC submission. A clerical error. I looked at Sarah. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of her head. I stayed silent. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable for him, glorious for me. A clerical error? Sarah's voice sliced through the tension, cool and sharp as a scalpel. Or a fraudulent statement submitted to a federal agency? I find it's best to use precise language in these matters, Mr. Crane. Don't you? More silence. I could almost hear the sweat beading on his forehead. This was it. This was the moment his world cracked. This was my moral victory, served cold. We are, he finally croaked, prepared to discuss a resolution. Sarah smiled. It was the smile of a surgeon who had just completed a flawless, career-defining operation. I'm sure you are, she said. Let's be real, if you were in my position, would you go for a quiet, massive settlement, or would you make a huge public example out of them? I want to hear what you would do.